Hello, my friends. How are you today, and where are you joining us from? In this video, we step into a theme that can reshape the very fabric of existence. Consciousness as an active force shaping reality through the observer effect. What if reality itself obeys an unseen law, awakened only in the moment of perception? And what if consciousness is not a witness, but the creator of the world, right here, right now? This mystery, hidden in the depths of science and mysticism, has the power to overturn everything we thought we knew about existence. The first whisper of the mystery did not arrive in temples, nor in the solitude of ancient caves, but in the sharp light of laboratories, where instruments measured what seemed solid and certain. Physicists, observing the tiniest building blocks of matter, noticed something strange. Particles behaved one way when unseen, and another way when someone was watching. It was as if the very act of attention carried a silent command, shifting the hidden dance of creation. What science expected to be constant and mechanical revealed itself as fluid and uncertain. An electron, left alone, moved as if it were a wave of infinite possibilities, spreading across space like a breath of air. Yet the instant it was measured, it collapsed into a single point, obedient to the eye that dared to witness it. The experimenters repeated their trials, hoping to eliminate chance, but the paradox only deepened. The act of observation was no longer passive. It was participation. Imagine, for a moment, a tree swaying in the wind. Its branches respond to the movement of air, yet the air itself is invisible until it bends the leaves. In the same way, consciousness appeared as the unseen wind, shaping matter into form. The discovery unsettled the old certainty that reality existed independently, untouched by awareness. Instead, it suggested that reality awaited the glance of the observer, like clay waiting for the sculptor's hand. For centuries, the human mind had been trained to separate subject from object, self from world. But the laboratory unveiled a crack in that division. If particles transformed under observation, then the observer could not remain outside the event. The boundary between the witness and the witnessed dissolved like mist under sunlight. Something profound had been uncovered. Reality was not fixed. It was responsive, alive, and in quiet dialogue with the gaze that fell upon it. This revelation was not a final answer, but the beginning of a new kind of question. If even the smallest fragment of existence responded to the act of being seen, what then of larger forms, of choices, of intentions, of lives themselves? Could it be that consciousness is not standing at the edge of the stage, but is, in truth, the hidden playwright? The discovery was unsettling, yes, but also liberating, for it whispered of a freedom long forgotten. The freedom to shape reality not only with hands, but with awareness itself. Once the first crack appeared in the wall of certainty, a deeper question unfolded. Why does mere observation hold such power? In the quiet halls of science, this question echoed louder than the experiments themselves. It was not only about electrons or photons, but about the relationship between mind and matter. What hidden bridge allowed a thought, a glance, or a silent witness to alter the path of reality? Physicists tried to approach it with numbers, formulas, and probabilities. Yet each attempt brought them back to the same strange recognition, that the observer could never be excluded from the picture. Consciousness was not an outsider peeking into a finished play. It was entangled in the performance. This realization unsettled the proud tradition of detached science, where neutrality was the highest value. The question refused to fade, like a flame flickering even in the absence of wind. Philosophers, too, found themselves drawn into the paradox. For centuries, they had debated whether the world existed independent of perception. Now, experiments hinted that the very act of perceiving was woven into the foundation of existence. It was as though the cosmos were waiting for attention, pausing in a state of shimmering uncertainty, until awareness arrived to guide its movement. Imagine walking through a dimly lit room where objects blur into shadow. Only when you shine a lantern do shapes solidify into tables, chairs, or doors. The world of particles seemed to follow a similar rule. Without the light of observation, it remained undefined, suspended in possibility. The observer's gaze became the lantern, revealing paths that did not exist before the act of looking. But the question grew heavier. If observation alters the smallest units of matter, could it also ripple outward into the fabric of life itself? Does intention bend the unfolding of events the same way it bends the flight of particles? And if so, what responsibility rests upon each act of awareness, each thought that drifts across the mind? There was no single answer. The paradox lived at the threshold between science and mystery, refusing to be contained by equations alone. It demanded another kind of vision, one that combined reason with intuition, analysis with reverence. For the question was not merely intellectual, it was existential. It asked each seeker to reconsider their place in the cosmos, not as a distant witness, but as a co-creator of the scene unfolding before them. As scientists wrestled with their instruments and paradoxes, another voice seemed to rise, one not born in laboratories, but in temples, deserts, and hidden sanctuaries. Long before electrons were named, ancient traditions whispered of the force of attention, of prayer, of the spoken word shaping what was yet unseen. What physics had stumbled upon, mystics had carried in symbols, chants, and sacred silence. The parallel was striking. Where physics spoke of probability waves collapsing under observation, the mystic spoke of thought becoming form through intention. Where the scientist used lasers and detectors, the monk used mantra and meditation. Both sought to penetrate the veil that separates the unformed from the formed, the possible from the actual. And though their languages differed, the resonance between them became impossible to ignore. Consider the ancient ritual of chanting a word until it vibrates through the body. To the casual listener, it may appear as sound repeated into emptiness. But within the mystic's vision, every syllable bends the field of being, weaving harmony into the unseen fabric of existence. Now compare this with the scientist watching a photon behave differently when observed. Both reveal that awareness is not passive. It is an active current that directs movement. The wisdom of mystics described reality as a mirror. Whatever is held within the inner chamber of thought will eventually reflect outward into form. Modern physics, through the observer effect, had stumbled upon the same mirror, though it named it in equations and probabilities rather than parables. In both paths, the message was clear. The world is not fixed stone, but living clay, softened by the warmth of attention. What emerged was not a conflict, but a bridge. Science and mysticism, long considered opposites, began to touch at their edges. One approached from the mind, the other from the spirit, yet they converged in the recognition that consciousness plays a central role in shaping reality. It was no longer possible to dismiss the ancient teachings as mere superstition, nor the experiments as mere accidents. They mirrored one another across the gulf of time. This intersection did not provide final answers, but it widened the horizon. It suggested that humanity stood not at the end of knowledge, but at the threshold of rediscovery, a remembering that the inner and the outer, the seen and the unseen, the formula and the prayer, all belong to one continuum. The observer effect was not simply a scientific curiosity. It was a modern echo of a truth humanity had once known and slowly forgotten. Behind the paradox and the parallels lies something subtler. Attention itself is not an empty act. To look, to notice, to hold an image in mind, these gestures carry energy, as real as the warmth of fire or the pull of gravity. Science often describes this energy in terms of probability and influence, while mysticism frames it as vibration, frequency, or spirit. Yet in both, the essence is clear. Consciousness directs and matter responds. Imagine a musician guiding dancers with the rhythm of a drum. The steps on the floor shift and sway, not by their own accord, but by the pulse that calls them. In the same way, attention gives rhythm to the dance of atoms. Without it, matter drifts in uncertainty, like dancers waiting for a signal. With it, reality synchronizes, moving toward the pattern suggested by the gaze. Thoughts, then, are not silent guests in the mind. They are waves, spreading outward like ripples across a still lake. Each ripple touches the surface beyond its origin, carrying form and influence into places unseen. A fearful thought vibrates differently than a thought of compassion, and each draws the world into resonance with its tone. The mirror of reality reflects back whatever current is sent toward it. This hidden force is easily overlooked because it moves quietly. Hands can build houses and roads, and eyes can witness the results. But the architecture of attention builds in subtler realms. Relationships shaped by belief, opportunities drawn by focus, entire paths altered by the simple persistence of vision. What seems invisible at first becomes undeniable when one notices how repeated thought crystallizes into circumstance. Modern understanding sometimes reduces this to mental influence or psychological suggestion, but the field is wider and deeper. Ancient wisdom called it the weaving of destiny, the breath of the divine, the echo between the inner and outer worlds. It is not about commanding matter by force, but about aligning with the currents that flow through all things. Where attention goes, energy follows. Where energy gathers, form appears. To awaken to this truth is to recognize that nothing thought or felt is ever without effect. Every glance, every reflection, every whispered intention contributes to the shaping of the whole. Consciousness is not powerless. It is a subtle sculptor, leaving impressions upon the clay of existence. And the hidden power of attention, once seen, can no longer be denied. If a single particle shifts its path under the gaze of an observer, what then of a human life, vast and intricate, moving through years of choices and crossroads? The same principle whispers here. Intention is not a shadow, it is a seed. Each decision, each thought carried with awareness, becomes a stroke on the canvas of destiny. Imagine standing at a river's edge. The current flows endlessly, and yet with a single stone dropped into the water, new ripples spread outward, altering the course of movement in subtle, far-reaching ways. In the same manner, each conscious thought creates ripples across the fabric of time, bending the possibilities that stretch before us. Destiny is no longer an external script written by unseen hands. It is a river shaped by the stones we cast with our focus. To live unconsciously is to let the current sweep one along, believing fate to be fixed and merciless. But when the observer awakens, the current becomes malleable. Every moment transforms into a point of creation, a threshold where reality waits for attention to give it form. The role of consciousness is not passive endurance, but active participation. Think of the farmer who plants seeds in fertile soil. The earth itself holds countless possibilities, but only the chosen seed, nurtured with water and sunlight, grows into visible life. In the same way, the field of reality is fertile, yet only the seeds of intention truly take root. Each thought directed with care is a planting. Each act of attention is a cultivation. This understanding does not erase difficulty or erase chance, but it reframes them. Struggles and obstacles no longer appear as punishments from an indifferent world. They emerge as reflections of hidden beliefs, unspoken fears, or unclaimed strengths. To notice them is to measure the contours of one's own destiny, to realize that even hardship carries the imprint of consciousness. Thus, the question of fate shifts. Destiny is not a rigid line carved in stone, but a living pattern shaped by awareness. The observer's gaze becomes both compass and brush, guiding the unfolding of events. In this recognition, life ceases to be a script imposed from outside and becomes a dance co-authored by the soul in the universe. And so, each day, with each breath, the measurement of fate continues. Not in laboratories, but in the choices made, the thoughts held, the visions nurtured. Consciousness is the unseen hand upon the scales, tipping reality toward one possibility or another. And in this realization, freedom quietly awakens. The further science pursued its quest to confine the mystery within formulas, the more elusive it became. Equations grew complex, predictions more precise, yet the essence of the observer's role resisted capture. Consciousness refused to be reduced to numbers alone. It moved like mist, slipping through the rigid boundaries of definition, reminding those who studied it that not all truths can be weighed or measured. On the other side stood mysticism, carrying centuries of whispered traditions. Here, thought was not a private spark inside the skull, but an action equal to movement in the outer world. To think with clarity was to act upon the unseen. To imagine with devotion was to alter the flow of events yet to come. For mystics, there was no separation between the inner word and the outer deed. They were threads of the same fabric, woven together in silence. Between these two approaches, one rooted in formulas, the other in visions, emerged a fragile boundary. Science declared, only what is tested can be known. Mysticism replied, only what is lived can be real. Yet, in their dialogue, the boundary thinned. The discoveries of physics made space for ancient teachings, and the insights of mystics found unexpected allies in laboratories. What had been dismissed as superstition began to shimmer again as possible knowledge, carried on the wings of paradox. Imagine standing at twilight, when daylight has not fully gone and darkness has not fully arrived. In that liminal hour, the world feels both familiar and strange. The outlines of objects soften, and shadows seem alive. That is the nature of this boundary. It is twilight, where certainty dissolves, and a new kind of vision becomes possible. Within this twilight, the central question sharpens. What is primary, matter or the one who observes it? Is the world a machine that happens to include awareness, or is awareness the ground upon which matter dances? If the latter holds true, then the entire edifice of material certainty collapses into something richer, a cosmos sustained by the gaze of consciousness itself. This realization does not diminish science, it expands it. For every formula rests on the assumption of an observer to write it, to measure, to witness. Without observation, even the most elegant equation remains an abstraction, untested and unfulfilled. Consciousness is not a side effect, it is the silent partner in every discovery. And for mysticism, the presence of physics brings a new language, a validation that the unseen is not mere imagination, but carries structure, rhythm, and law. The sacred becomes not opposed to knowledge, but illuminated by it, given new bridges through which to reach the modern mind. Thus, the boundary between objective and subjective is not a wall, but a veil, thin and shimmering, ready to dissolve when approached with humility. Science and mysticism, once enemies, now stand like two shores of the same river. Between them flows the current of truth, the recognition that to observe is to create, and to create is to observe. If a single mind can influence the smallest of particles, what happens when many minds align? Here lies the mystery of resonance, the joining of consciousness in a shared field. The solitary flame of awareness carries power, but when combined with others, it becomes a fire that reshapes landscapes, both inner and outer. History itself bears witness to this. Great movements, revolutions of thought, awakenings of culture, often began with a convergence of shared intention. In the sacred rituals of old, communities gathered to chant, pray, or dance in unison. To the uninitiated, these gatherings may have appeared as tradition or superstition. Yet beneath the surface, a deeper law was at play. The synchronization of minds amplifies the effect of each thought. Just as a choir produces harmonies richer than any single voice, the field of collective attention vibrates with a potency far beyond the sum of its parts. Science, too, has brushed against this mystery. Studies of group meditation reveal measurable shifts, drops in violence, increases in coherence, subtle changes in the atmosphere of entire cities. Though many dismiss such findings, the echoes remain, hints that shared focus bends the probabilities of reality itself. What mystics described as invocation, physics begins to frame as coherence, resonance, or alignment. Consider the image of tuning forks. Strike one, and another across the room begins to vibrate in sympathy. Consciousness operates in similar fashion. A single focused mind resonates with those nearby, subtly encouraging them into the same rhythm. When dozens, hundreds, or thousands enter that rhythm together, reality itself seems to tremble, awaiting new form. Resonance does not always announce itself with grandeur. Sometimes it is the quiet strength of families aligned in care, communities supporting one another in silence, or circles of friends holding a common vision. Each shared intention multiplies the reach of awareness, weaving invisible threads through the fabric of events. These threads, though unseen, shape outcomes that later appear as chance, coincidence, or miracle. But resonance also carries responsibility. Just as harmonious thought can birth healing, collective fear or hatred can harden into storms of violence. The field reflects not only light, but shadow, amplifying whichever tone dominates. Thus, to participate in collective awareness is to hold a part of the world's balance in one's own heart. To offer peace within is to plant peace without. The great truth whispered here is that no consciousness is isolated. Every mind is a note in a larger symphony. Every emotion a vibration that echoes beyond the individual. The resonance of many shapes the destiny of the few, and the resonance of the few can ripple into the destiny of many. Consciousness is not merely personal, it is profoundly communal. In this light, the observer effect expands into something greater than experiment or philosophy. It becomes a principle of human unity, a reminder that together, minds weave the future. To recognize resonance is to awaken to the immense responsibility and the profound gift of being part of the whole. To understand resonance in its deepest form, one must turn inward. For the world outside is not separate from the inner landscape. It is a mirror, polished or clouded by the gaze of the one who looks. Fear bends this mirror into shadows. Love brightens it into clarity. Every thought, every hidden emotion becomes a quiet painter, coloring the reflection returned by life. Ancient teachings often spoke of the inner temple, a sanctuary not built by hands but carried within the heart. In that space, one's beliefs and emotions gather like silent architects, shaping the architecture of fate. What dwells in this temple flows outward, projected upon the canvas of reality. To transform the world, the mystics taught, one must first transform the chamber of the self. Consider the stillness of a lake at dawn. When the surface is calm, it reflects the sky with perfect clarity. Clouds, mountains, and the rising sun appear as though painted on water. But when the lake is stirred by storms, its reflection shatters into distortion. So it is with consciousness. A mind unsettled by fear, anger, or doubt reflects a broken image back into the outer world. A mind quieted by love, trust, and clarity reflects harmony into every direction. Science may describe this in terms of psychological projection or emotional resonance, yet beneath the terminology lies the same principle. The inner state determines the outer perception. What seems hostile or welcoming in the world often mirrors what has been carried inside all along. The universe responds to the vibrational tone of the heart, offering back experiences that resonate with its frequency. This truth is both challenging and liberating. It challenges because it dismantles the comfort of blame. No longer can the world be seen as an indifferent force imposing itself upon the individual. Instead, it reveals itself as a responsive field, echoing the subtle messages carried by thought and feeling. But it is also liberating because it restores power to the center of being. By transforming the inner mirror, one transforms the reflection itself. To practice this is not a matter of denying difficulty or pretending away pain. Rather, it is the art of acknowledging what arises within, meeting it with awareness, and slowly shifting its vibration. Fear can be transmuted into courage, anger into clarity, sorrow into compassion. Each inner transformation ripples outward, altering the weave of relationships, choices, and circumstances. Thus, the hidden mirror becomes the key. To polish it is to bring the outer world into new order. To neglect it is to live in distorted reflections, mistaking them for truth. The observer effect, seen here, is not only a principle of particles, it is the living law of the soul. By tending the inner state, one writes upon the canvas of existence itself. There comes a moment when the mirror no longer frightens with shadows, but invites with light. The understanding of the observer effect, once a scientific puzzle or mystical metaphor, begins to settle into lived awareness. Consciousness recognizes itself not as a prisoner of circumstance, but as a quiet author shaping the script of life. This recognition marks the threshold of awakening. Awakening is not sudden fire, though it may feel like lightning striking in the silence of the night. More often, it unfolds as dawn, gradual, tender, steady. First, a faint glow appears on the horizon, barely noticeable. Then the sky softens into color, and finally the sun rises, illuminating all that was once hidden in darkness. In the same way, awakening grows as one realizes, little by little, the creative nature of attention. At first, it seems unbelievable. The mind protests. How could my thoughts matter so much? How could my gaze alter the vast machinery of the cosmos? Yet with practice, evidence accumulates. The patterns of life shift when inner patterns change. Encounters, opportunities, and challenges appear not at random, but as reflections of the observer's state. Reality, once thought indifferent, reveals itself as responsive, alive, and mysteriously intimate. Imagine standing in a garden where seeds lie buried in soil. Day after day, the gardener waters, tends, and waits. Eventually, tiny shoots break the surface, fragile yet determined. Awakening is much like this patience. It is the gradual blossoming of recognition that each intention planted will, in its season, bear fruit. The soul learns to watch more carefully what seeds are chosen, for it knows now the field responds faithfully. This shift in understanding births a new kind of freedom. No longer does consciousness feel bound by external powers alone. Authority and fate dissolve into participation and choice. To awaken is to step into responsibility, not heavy, but luminous. Each thought becomes sacred, each moment a creative spark. The mundane transforms into miracle, not because the world changes suddenly, but because the lens through which it is seen has cleared. The paradox of awakening is that it feels both deeply personal and profoundly universal. While one recognizes their own role as co-creator, they also sense the shared nature of creation. Every being, every heart, is engaged in the same mysterious dialogue with reality. The awakening of one echoes into the awakening of many, like the first bird's song heralding dawn for the entire forest. In this state, life is no longer endured as random sequence. It is embraced as a sacred unfolding, a partnership between consciousness and the infinite. The observer effect is no longer a theory confined to physics or mysticism. It becomes the pulse of daily existence, the quiet truth that observing is creating, and creating is awakening. When the long path of discovery, question, resonance, and reflection reaches its quiet conclusion, the observer effect ceases to be a distant mystery and becomes a guide for life itself. What once seemed like an abstract puzzle in physics now reveals itself as the heartbeat of existence. Consciousness is not a bystander. It is the artist, the witness, and the stage all at once. Reality no longer appears as a static structure of stone. Instead, it unfolds like a living play, where every glance paints new scenery, and every thought shifts the direction of the script. The world is responsive, pliable, attentive. It waits, moment by moment, for the silent command of awareness. In this recognition, life itself becomes sacred, for every instant carries the seed of creation. Imagine standing before a canvas that has never been touched. In one hand rests a brush, in the other a palette of colors. Each stroke will alter the image, and no hand but yours will decide the form. To live with awakened awareness is to realize that this canvas is not empty walls. It is the living reality surrounding you. The brush is your focus, the colors are your emotions, and the painting is the unfolding of destiny. This realization does not mean every outcome can be bent at will. The dance of existence is a co-creation. Consciousness offers its attention, and the larger field responds with harmony, balance, and sometimes correction. Just as a musician improvises with fellow players, weaving melody within a shared rhythm, so does each soul create in partnership with the whole. Freedom is found not in control, but in alignment. The hidden power, once dismissed as illusion or confined to laboratories, now breathes through every choice. To look with fear is to summon shadows. To look with love is to summon light. The observer effect, seen this way, is not only about particles collapsing into form. It is about human beings awakening to their role as participants in the eternal act of creation. Thus, the story returns to simplicity. Consciousness observes, and the world responds. Each moment renews the cycle. Each breath opens the possibility for a new shape of reality. What science discovered and what mysticism preserved converge into a single truth. Reality is born again and again in the gaze of the observer. And so, the invitation is clear. Live with awareness. Tend the inner mirror. Recognize the resonance you share with all other beings. For in every act of observation, the cosmos reshapes itself, whispering back, "Create wisely, for your gaze is the dawn of worlds." The journey comes to a close, yet the path continues within. What began as a scientific riddle and an ancient whisper has unfolded into a living truth. Consciousness is not a passive witness, but a co-creator of reality. The observer effect is not locked in laboratories, nor hidden only in temples. It is present in every glance, every choice, every breath. Reality is not distant, cold, or indifferent. It is alive, pliable, and waiting. It responds not to force, but to the quality of attention. And so, each of us carries the key, the ability to shape life not through power, but through awareness. Let this recognition be both gentle and profound. Gentle, because it calls for patience and kindness with the self. Profound, because it reminds us that no act of awareness is small. Every thought is a seed, every intention a wave, every observation a spark of creation. So the story closes, not with an ending, but with an opening. The canvas of reality remains before you, brush in hand, colors waiting. What you choose to see, you choose to bring forth. And in that choosing, the mystery of existence continues to bloom. My friends, thank you for walking through this contemplative journey. Your attention is not just listening, it is part of the resonance that shapes this shared space. May these reflections inspire you, reminding you that the power to create has always been within reach.